Among the Game Gear games, there's a pretty broad consensus that Triple Trouble is probably the best one. And then you're not really going to hear anybody complain if you say that Sonic 3 and Knuckles is one of the best platformers of all time. But among the Sonic Advance games on the Game Boy Advance, I've never really heard if there's like one game that everybody likes more than the others. So I decided to ask you all, which one of the Sonic Advance games was your favorite? 1, 2, or 3? And you know what I got back? No opinion. There's no game that everybody likes more than the others. I mean, in fact, the most popular option was that you didn't have a preference. But even more, there was no second place. All of the other 3 were exactly tied for second. And the reason why I asked this was, personally, I think Sonic Advance 2 is the best. Maybe it's because that's the one I had when I was a teenager and I didn't get the other ones till later. Sonic Advance 2 came out hot on the heels of Sonic Advance 1, almost exactly a year after the first release. Building on the same engine, Sega and Dimps made the game bigger, faster, and controversially, harder. If Sonic Advance 1 was looking back over its shoulder at the Genesis classics, Sonic Advance 2 is all about looking forward, going big and going really, really fast. Yep, this game moves faster than Sonic Advance 1 to the point that Sonic Advance 1 feels slow by comparison. For that reason, I recommend starting with Sonic Advance before this game because it's much easier to get used to going faster than getting used to going slower. The main source of this speed is a mechanic where characters burst into a high speed mode after moving forward for a long enough stretch, or when there's something to launch them. There's a sprite trail, and the camera acts like it's barely able to keep up. It's a ton of fun, and when it works, it kind of feels like Supersonic. At its best, this game really captures that I'm barely holding on, reacting just in the nick of time feeling that is one of the elusive highs of the Sonic series. However, there is a downside to this. Big sections of the game sometimes feel like you're doing nothing but pressing forward to keep going, and you can be punished if you try to jump or do anything in sections made to just go fast. The speed mechanic also rewards speedrun type playthroughs, which is directly in opposition to the slow exploration required to find all the special rings required to get to the special zones. Personally, I always just ignored the special rings and just let the levels take me wherever they wanted to go. Otherwise, the mechanics and physics of the game are very similar to Sonic Advance, which makes sense since they really share basically the same engine. Sonic has a weird leap forward that's kind of like the bad version of the slight spin dash of Sonic Advance 1. He now also is briefly invincible when he does the attack in midair. Tails is also identical, it's just some updated animations. Knuckles is back too, and he's mostly the same with his usual gliding and climbing moves. His punch is kind of nerfed though, losing the ability to chain the punches together, but he never really used the punches, so whatever, it's fine. Cream is our first newcomer. Okay, I'll admit, when I first got this game, I barely ever played as Cream. But when I revisited Sonic Advance 2 for this review, this character is easily my favorite. The homing Chow attack is awesome, and it comes incredibly in handy when playing some of the more frustrating bosses. If you play Sonic Advance 2 with only one character, Cream is the one to play. You can also play as Amy Rose, but in order to do so, you're going to have to beat the game after getting every single Chaos Emerald. And simply getting to the special stages is such an overwhelming pain that only the most absolute 0.0005% of hardcore Sonic Advance 2 players are ever going to unlock her. Unless, that is, if you live in some fictional reality where you have access to a really cool emulator that might do things like let you utilize cheats. Say, just in theory, RetroArch, I don't know where I came up with that name, where you can go into the settings, enable cheats, and boom, you got Amy. It's wild that it's so hard to unlock this character because there really was a lot of work put into her. She's gone through the most changes from the previous entry, by far, making her much more like the other characters for both better and worse. In Sonic Advance 1, the only way Amy could attack enemies was with her hammer, and she couldn't attack by jump or spin dash like everybody else. In Advance 2, that's been completely thrown out, as Amy can now spin dash and attack by jumping like everybody else. She also still has her hammer moves, which have been rearranged different buttons, such as attacking in air by hitting jump again, and removing the super tall jump in favor of ground pound. It's also a lot of fun, but honestly I kind of missed the challenge of playing levels in a completely different playstyle. Oh well, it's not like anybody will ever actually get a chance to play her in this game anyways. And that's it. right? I mean, there's like no tutorial or instruction in the game that says there's some odd shoulder button based moves that you would need to press through the levels. Then we'll move right along. The presentation of this game is even better than the first Sonic Advance, which was already pretty awesome. Everything just gets even more polished and more detail, and the sprites look phenomenal. The level designs are awesome, and this game still holds up, especially on small screen sizes. The little ring spinning at the same speed that you're running is one of those interface touches that I love and I miss in every other Sonic game. Alright, so when you talk about Sonic Advance 2, you gotta talk about the boss battles. The boss battles are auto-scrollers, and they're probably one of the most polarizing aspects of the game. You're running along and you have to attack the boss while still running and trying to keep up with it. However, I kind of like them to some degree. Sonic is about running and about going fast, so it only makes sense that the boss battles are also about running and going fast. Most of the strategy of these levels is really just about not grabbing all the rings at once so that it'll be there when a level cycles around, and also making sure that you don't jump in the wrong incline. So sometimes they're fun, but at their worst, these boss battles are insanely difficult and frustrating. Both the snow level and the sky level bosses are particularly brutal, with the giant hand just being able to one-shot you for no reason. Throwing salt in the wound is that the final level of the game is just one big boss gauntlet, which goes a long way towards killing any goodwill that you might have towards this kind of boss. Alright, before we get into the levels, let's talk about the special zones. If you're a glutton for punishment and you seek out every single special ring in the zone, you'll be rewarded with a special zone. This time we're looking at a Mode 7 style pseudo 3D space that kind of reminds me quite a bit of the old Sonic CD special zones. It's more fun than the tube style ring collection of Sonic Advance 1, but it's still not really fun enough to justify the time and effort it takes to find all the rings in a level. Really, only seek these out if you're a die-hard 100% completionist. Now, the first level is of course Green Hill Zone, Leaf Forest, but let's be real. Those abstract polygons in the background look way more like a Green Hill Zone than any leafy forest I've ever seen. I actually like this level quite a bit, and its strong design gives the game a great start. Sonic Advance 2 levels are really big with lots of alternative paths, and they're great for multiple playthroughs, so I never really got tired of this level whenever I started a new game in Sonic Advance 2. Hot Crater Zone comes next, and like nearly every level in this game, just knocks it out of the park with the art design. It feels like the best version of the lava level that has appeared in so many of the Game Gear Sonic games. Music Plant is the third zone, and easily one of my all-time favorite Sonic levels. Usually I prefer levels that feel more like a real place as opposed to like the abstract designs of a game like Sonic CD, but I absolutely adore the Candyland weirdness of Music Plant. Every spring, enemy, tube, and level item makes a noise, and the resulting cacophony is so much fun to blast through. The best Sonic game levels understand a big part of the fun is wildly bouncing around with all kinds of fun things to break and rocket off of. And Music Plant is right up there. Ice Paradise Zone is another ice level. Like all the others, even though it is kind of generic, it's executed well enough, combining a city theme with the usual snow. Next comes Sky Canyon, which is a cool looking level where everything goes terribly, terribly wrong. This might be the last level of the game you ever see. It's an absolute wall. Early in Act 1, you get sprung up into a gap with an arrow pointing up, but no way of going up, so you just fall to your death, over and over and over. With Sonic's normal moveset, there's no way to get past this. So with Sonic, that's where the game ended for me. For years, I never played past this point in the game with anybody with Tails. And it turns out you use a move I've never ever heard of in a Sonic game. You press up and the R shoulder button as you're falling, you get a random height boost. What the ever-loving. If you're one of the few people who have the manual for this game, there's actually a page that shows something called Mid-Air Trick Actions. Confusingly, these are not moves you do after jumping, which is generally, how you get into the air in these games. No, these are moves you can only do if you launch off a spring or some kind while you're falling, and they're all triggered by the top R button for some reason. The button you never ever use, so there's no way you're even going to accidentally trigger one of these motions to learn how to do it? On one hand, These are fun additional movements. On the other hand, this game does nothing to teach you that they even exist. I bought this game brand new, played it consistently for years, and I never knew that this was a thing. Anyways, enough ranting. The techno-based grind bars are cool, so that's something. However, in this level, something keeps making my speakers pop, which is kind of unpleasant, so your mileage may vary. Finally, the regular levels wrap up with a traditional Eggman factory, which is called Egg Utopia in this iteration. After that comes XX, which is just a final boss rush. Whether or not this will be a painful slog for you will depend on how much you dislike or like the running style boss battles. If, by some miracle, you've gotten all the Chaos Emeralds and you're playing as Sonic, there is also an extra boss battle level. So after all of that, should you play Sonic Advance 2? Yeah, I mean, I love this game. I still love this game. I think one of the reasons why I didn't get one of the other Sonic Advance games for so long was that there's a lot to dig into here. And by the time you're tired of Sonic Advance 2, you're kind of tired of Sonic in general for a little while. So yeah, this really scratched the itch. I mean, this game has Music Plant Zone, which is amazing. So I'm going to love it for that. I totally understand why people may not like this game, but I think it's perfect to load onto your little emulator machine. I hope it comes out on Nintendo Switch at some point soon. All these Sonic Advance games are probably more similar than they are different, and it's really going to come down to your personal taste on which one you like more. So why not give them all a try? And you know what? Let me know which one's your favorite, and we'll see if we get that poll out sometime in the future if there's another one that somehow manages to eke it out in front of the others. But yeah, in the meantime, like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff, and I'll see you in the next video.